Alright, let's try it. So, long pauses to begin with. This heralds a very long video, rich in substance and minerals. There you go. So, we got stuck on the subject of the will to power. Sisyphus says it's mental masturbation. Anyway, it can be that. Like any logic, I suppose, can definitely be, if you get just kind of swept into it and then kind of follow it around through your head. I guess that's what happens normally. Okay, hold on there. You're gonna probably fall here because I'm having some sharp curves to make it to follow. Don't. Oh no! Don't fall. Oh, come on now. Hold on. Hold. Yeah, back. We're back. So, what is there to say about the will to power that is not boring? This is a very good question. Without an answer. Still, I have to say something, because this was supposed to be a really spicy, content-rich video. How am I going to fulfill that promise? See? Now I have given you a hint of what the will to power of myself. I've given a hint. I've hit on maybe a hint of a gold mine. So I've set for myself a certain standard, namely in this case the making of a very substantial video. So I've set that standard, which is then which can only be attained by willing, right? Willing to power. So the standard, once it has the standard becomes power, and the work of attaining to this standard, or the intention of attaining this standard, living up to it, becomes the will to power. I think that is another very boring way of describing the will to power. Still, it's boring, but it's true. Yet, because it is boring, it's not an answer to the question how to talk about the will to power in a way that is not boring. I'm taking the standard of boredom of Pezer. That's the only person that can annoy me with impunity. Not entirely impunity, but the thing is, he's quite resistant to the punity. So, so what is bore? So I must reward this resistance, because that's rewarding in itself. You know, that's tough. Pezer is pretty tough. So will to power only becomes interesting, I think, to the type that Pezer represents if once it starts to scheme, once it starts to play forces against each other with tangible and palpable results, so that things happen. I mean, that sounds very banal to say that's probably the standard, but I think that's true though. I think basically this standard needs for things to occur and change and be on the move. because otherwise it's not empirical enough. And this is only fair. And what needs to happen? Like, what? That is my question. Because I agree that, you know, I think there's... Sowelius might disagree that things need to happen for the will to power to be interesting. I don't know. But I do agree, but my position, my sort of... amendment on this, or a limit on this is that, well, not everything should be happening. I do have preferences for specific types of things to happen. Not saying that you others don't have these standards, but I'm just saying that is what value ontology adds. Part of what value ontology adds to the will to power is that it focuses very much on, well, precisely that it's not just power that matters. Power is very diverse. It has many types. One might say even every single instance of will to power is its own. No, but that's wrong. There's many types, but not every instance is its own type. That would kind of defeat the word type. So my will to power has a lot to do in this era of my philosophy. I guess I can split up my life in eras of philosophy. In this era, I'd say the second era of value ontology is shit, it's Friday, I forgot. So, it has a lot to do with crystallizing, you know, finding out, establishing, creating a fertile field or forest of, for my specific type of will to power, so that it can operate on itself without having to be, you know, contaminated by willings to power that are also will to power, but are just too boring or too sad or too weak or too, you know, impure, or just too trivial and general and you know, precedented for me to actually experience it as a will to power rather than a decay. I guess we might say that's an important thing to say, that decay, that the will to power does have an opposite in decay, and thus decadence is indeed, as Sowelius remarks, essentially the negation of the will to power, or so decadence is which mainly occurs in humans, which is an interesting topic to explore. Why that only mostly occurs in humans is a hold on, I'm trying to think. Yeah. Okay, I've decided which exit I'll take. Yeah, decay. So yeah, that species or humans that simply do not like that the fact that the world is will to power and they actively try to, obscure this. This is itself naturally a willing to power, but it is a will to power to annihilate itself, to abase itself, to release, let's say, to decrease the tension. Isn't that what decadence is? To the wish to decrease tension just for the sake of decreasing it. Whereas, so this is also why Nietzsche, incidentally, like, he's kind of opposed childbirth, or he doesn't, I mean, that's a joke, but he's not opposed to, but he does see the drive to procreate, or the fact of procreation, as a weakness, as a sort of a surrender to a weakness, or he would see the shedding of the seed, or of the whatever, even of the or the birth of the kid, or whatever, or anyway, the transplacement of the life force and substance from the parents to the kid, to the thing that comes into existence, as you would see that as just throwing off ballast, an act of things having grown too heavy, essentially, and then always just put that weight into a new kid, a new human being, let him represent that new weight. And in this sense, you can see what he means with, or what I mean actually, with release of tension for its own sake, for the sake of this release. That is, whereas if one, for example, would have a child to continue a royal house, continue a bloodline that has some meaning in the world, that would be something that I think Nietzsche would consider then he would consider pregnancy, or that procreation on both sides. He would both see it as a shedding of burden, as well as a creation of more tension, a tensing of the will's arc. Maybe only the latter, even. If the conception is purely teleological and not romantic. Romantic tensions. I would be interested to discuss with Parodites the tension that what I'm now bringing above the surface. I'm kind of insinuating a relationship between decadence and romance, or between the romance and the slackening of the will's arc tension. But I think there's an element of that where romance actually plays with the slackening, and it kind of usurps this into a new type of tension, of will tension. But my question really is, I'm kind of curious, what would be the limit of of the tension of the will, of the romantic? What is the perimeter? What is it? It's no and it's yes. Because it gets rather complicated, because it's all psychology, will to power. This Nietzsche is all psychology, so it gets more and more complicated once you split it down, split it up into different types of will to power, it becomes a, well, then it is revealed that the will to power is not a simple concept at all. But a very subtle one, where all these subtleties of human psychology are being done justice to, which is great. Which is great. It's just so, yeah. In the city. I've entered the city. Yo, so this video now, what have I said? Let's not overanalyze the video in the video. Oh yeah. There you go. Oh, watch out. Hold on to your hats. Oops. Several hats. Oh man. So the will to power comes into focus once you start discerning different types of will to power as they are contending with each other. Isn't that logical? Isn't that elegant? Yes, it is. You cannot, an sich, in itself, you cannot analyze the will to power. This is my statement now. My contention to your will to power is that it only begins to make sense, like it only begins to not be boring if you compare two different types of will to power, which already, you know, that's the nice thing about this thing I'm saying now, is that in order to discern two types of will to power, you already have to have a very subtle grasp of the concept itself, right? And not only that, but also have a decent working knowledge of existing human psychologies. That is maybe even more interesting about that. That in order to analyze will to power is not something you can analyze, like I said, as a sort of standalone concept. Like it's not a logic that deals with abstractions, but it's a logic that deals with the opposite of abstractions. So this is not naturally why people are terrified of it, because psychology is really, really terrifying if you're not, you know, if you're not turned out well, in a sense. If you have many physiological hang-ups and psychological hang-ups, how are you going to be a good psychologist? How are you going to be pure enough before yourself to understand others, let alone to understand the non-living? And this is kind of like, I think it's annoying that to me that so few Nietzscheans actually follow up on Nietzsche's broad approach to the will to power, which is certainly is not limited to the living or conscious. On the contrary, what it does is open up a field of comparison between the living and the non-living, between the animate and the so-called inanimate, by showing that there isn't really such a thing as inanimate matter, that everything is basically just animation. Or, I don't mean cartoons, obviously, but and so in this, if just to make a long story short, actually, so that it's not really a story, which is just, I don't have the space or time for this now, but oh fuck me, no, I could have fucking fulfilled my purpose of getting money, but yes, I was saying something about that. Yeah, I almost remember. Money's really a distraction. There it is. Creatures. So let's say Nietzsche's investigations of the will to power as a phenomenon only are initiated with his scrutiny of slave and master morality. It's not the case that it's very important to know exactly what, to the final detail what is slave morality abstractly, because it doesn't really exist abstractly. The only way in which slave and master morality matter as concepts is to weigh them against each other in different circumstances, and thereby get a picture of the will to power, let's say the good, the bad, and the ugly of it. So that is okay. Maybe that's a good summary of how to approach the will to power as the good, the bad, and the ugly. And the beautiful, but yeah. So, signing off.